Hello, lovelies. Welcome back to The Tangent. We are on episode 9. So, this episode, I wanted to share a little bit of a behind the scenes vibe. You may not know that I have a service dog. Her name is Eden, and she became a major part of my life. And it's interesting, I think, to people to hear about the process and experiences shared, and so that's what we're gonna do today. So hold on tight and let's get into it. Buckle up, lovelies. We're taking a ride through some of the quirkiest corners of my life on wheels. I'm Katie, and I've been doing this disabled thing since day one. This is not your typical disability education podcast. Every tangent, every detour is a chance to look behind that curtain of disabled life, unravel the threads of confusion, and discover those, whoa, that actually makes sense moments. Eventually, this is the tangent, where laughter is the map, curiosity is the compass, and understanding blooms even in the craziest corners. Hit subscribe, grab your headphones, and get ready to be surprised, because the way to understand why is to embrace the wild, hilarious how. So let's do the thing. Okay, so some basic information that you need to know as we go through this story. So you can picture my pup. So Eden is a Labrador cross retriever. She's a quarter retriever, which you do some maths, her mom was half or something. So she's a quarter retriever. She is actually retired now. And she worked with me for 8 years. She was trained by the South African Guide Dogs Association, and she is the last of 9 pups in her litter, so she has major runt energy. I feel like that makes sense to some people who have and know the runts, but I think that's really funny, and it really travels with her through her life. If you don't know anything about the process of how people get service dogs and working dogs, it's different for different organizations work in different ways, but the process that I have gone through, so you apply to get a dog, and then there are interviews to see what your need levels are, what they would need to train the dogs to do, what the particular things are for you that would be kind of different to standard training things. So you do all of that stuff, and then you go onto a wait list. Matching your the person with the pup is a super important part of the process, and SA Guide Dogs takes that really seriously, because you have to match the work need, the skills level with the personality, and the people and the pups have to work together. So if you don't get that match right, it can be really difficult, and it could not work out. So that's a super important part of the whole process. And then there's training, the dog's training, and then when you actually get your dog, you also do training with them, and then you figure out how to do things together. You get into work life, and then a couple years go by, maybe more than a couple, hopefully, and your dog retires. Eden is retired now, living her best life, and now I'm waiting for my new dog to arrive, and that's where we are right now. I wanted to share a little bit about all of that and my journey with Eden particularly. So a little bit about Eden's personality. She's very sassy, I would say. Very much like boss girl energy. She's super intuitive, like excessively so, in the best way possible. She's also quite stubborn, which I love. And she loves water. She's a Labrador. I think that kind of comes as standard, but she loves water so much. She loves swimming. Very food oriented, so snacks and treats have been important in our working relationship. And she has impeccable patience, but is also very opinionated. So she'll wait for you, but like you'll know that she's like, can we just get going, please? I don't understand why you're taking this long. It's generally like her vibe, but she will be like waiting beautifully. So that's kind of in a nutshell how she is. I remember when I met her, the day that I got her, they arrived at our house and they like undone her leash and she was kind of investigating. We were giving her space to look around and see where we were, where she was. And within 2 minutes, she had leapt into the pool. And that was amazing. I think that was an incredible introduction to her. And very on brand, I think. And if you've seen any of those intro pictures, that intro day photos that I have of her, she's all wet, and that's like the best. I think she's always been really good at easing the tension in a room just by existing in certain ways, and so I think she was doing that. Like, people are stressed around here, let me give them something to talk about that's not stressful. So that was funny, and that was like a beautiful introduction to the journey that I was going to go on with her. So she arrived and then training started. It was quite an intense process. Obviously, she was my first working dog, so I didn't know anything about what I was doing. I waited 4 years for her. A lot of my friends have said that we know that the matching process was top tier because my friends have said that Eden is me and a dog, and I'm choosing to take that as a compliment to all stakeholders. And I think it's pretty fair to say that. So when I got her and we started training, it was in October, which meant that I got her in my 3rd year of university. And in October, you're writing exams, like final exams. I got her while that was all happening, so we were bonding while I was studying. She was doing a lot of chilling with me while I learned like sociology things and stuff, and that was cool. But we had to like schedule training around my exams and study time and stuff, which is totally doable. I had to learn all the commands that they teach them, and that was interesting because you kind of go into it thinking that the dog needs to learn, but that's not what that is, because she knows all the commands and she knows them. I don't know them, so I have to learn those things more than she needs to. And at that point, you're also trying to build like vocabulary. So what they kind of do is the dogs learn like the general terms and commands that all of the pups use. There are standard words that mean the same thing for everybody. And then when you get your dog, you kind of mold the commands and the vocab to what works for you. I guess now would be a good time for an example. So an example of that, like it's verbal, like vocab, and also like body indication vocab, right? So I think it was day 3 of training or something. I think it's like 3 weeks that you're together with training with the trainers with you there every day. I think it was day 3 or something, and Eden went to go chomp something. She like leaned in to pick something up, and I think it was like food or something, and I instinctively went because that was easier for me to say than no, and it just kind of came out of me, and I felt really awkward about that. I felt like I was saying the wrong things, but I had to learn that we were molding what works for us. So Eden then learned that also means no. That's been a lifelong thing now. Means no. There's certain things like hey means, but like, what are you doing? Let's think about this before Also, I think the words evolve with you, right? Like you kind of figure them out as you go. And we worked out a system where I had her in lectures, and so she was trained to respond when you said things quietly. She also kind of malfunctions if you are loud with her, so it's more effective to be quiet and to say things forcefully but like quiet. So I sort of began to like touch her on her nose, and then she learned that meant that we needed to sit. And I didn't really do that intentionally. It just kind of happened. I didn't really put a lot of thought behind that particular thing, but that's kind of how things happen. Like you learn together, you figure things out together. That was one of the things that I was like, oh, that's quite cool that's sort of become a thing that we do. I also talk to her like a person, so people may be a bit judgy of that, but like her home language is English, people, so we speak English to her, and we speak in standard people tones, not really high pitched, because that's disrespectful. I think people have always been interested to hear the way that I work with her. A couple of terms that I sort of have used that I haven't really heard other people use is like gather yourself. Like gather. That means like you're being a bit intense right now. Can you just calm down? And it happened like we were at a beach or something, and she was getting so excited, and I looked at her and I was like, Eden, gather, my friend, and she did, and that was awesome. Felt very in control that day, and that was awesome. Actually, at the beginning of this journey, I felt really insecure about having her and being judged in public with her. You know, people thinking that like she's not listening to me. That was like very early days. Or like when she's being a little bit difficult and you have to manage her behavior. People forget that they are dogs and they have personalities, and you do have to manage those personalities. I felt really awkward about that a lot of the time, like thinking that people are looking at me, judging me for how I work with her, not understanding the processes that we do. And so I got over that pretty quickly. There were also like later on, or like throughout having a working dog, the number of people that cannot control themselves, when they see her, they have to come over and touch her and don't engage with me and don't ask her. Like you have to ask somebody in the situation. I got better at telling people to go away, and like not engage with her. She's working, you're distracting her. I got better at that in the years after training. And interestingly, like, speak was hard for her. Not for her, for me. So it's one of the commands that we use to get her to bark. So it's used if I'm stuck somewhere or if I need to get somebody's attention, and I can't physically go somewhere, or I need help that's relatively urgent, then she will speak, and people need to know that that is me needing help. And it is a different kind of bark. It's more purposeful, and it's telling you something. So if you hear a dog barking and there's not supposed to be dogs around, please go find that dog and see who it may be attached to, because they probably need help. And we used that once when I was stuck in an elevator. Funny, my friends were like, no, you're not. I like speak shit about that all the time. They were like, you're not stuck in the elevator. And I was like, yeah, I am. And then I told Ina to speak, and they were like, oh my gosh, she's stuck in the elevator, because they heard her echoing from inside. And it took us a minute to get to the point where she would speak for me. I felt really like a bad dog mom in that moment. Like, she wouldn't do it for me. She would do it for the trainers, and like, I just didn't understand why she was being so stubborn about it. Like, it's not that hard. And it was the last day of training, and we had devised other methods. We were like, we're gonna use different commands. We're gonna have her do other things when this is the situation, because she was just not having it. That kind of hurt my feelings. But then on the last day, she was like, okay, fine. And then she really got into it, and she became pretty good at that. So, sometimes you have to wait. And the dogs guide the way a little bit with that. Sometimes you have to listen to them and see where they're at and what they're wanting to do sometimes. So that all happened, and then we like kind of go out into the world together unsupervised, which is also an interestingly terrifying experience in the beginning. And I have some funny stories that happened. So I got eaten in October, and then we went like Christmas shopping one day, and I was in a Mr. Price home. Eden has always picked her own toys, right? So we go into the places, and I'm like, which one do you want? You get one. And I look delusional, because people, like, I'll ask them to help us, and I'm like, can you just kind of squeak that one so we can see what she feels about it? And there was like a chicken toy that squeaked in a weird pitch to her, and she was like, She basically sighed at that guy. She found some like minion related toy that she was like, yes, this is the one. So she's always had kind of autonomy or like choices around which toys she gets. And then we go into a Mr. Price home, and they have these giant doorstop worm things, and in her brain it's like a toy. She's like, oh, I want this one. And she got really quiet and started walking behind me, which is normal in some circumstances but not that one. So I look behind me. Here's my dog that I've had for like a couple months, who's walking around the store with a 1.5 meter long doorstop worm. I was like, babe, we're not doing this one. We're not taking this. It was like when you have a human toddler who wants a sweet and you say no, and then they throw a tantrum. That was basically what I was dealing with in dog form, which was ridiculous, and I was okay with that. But I was like, babe, we're putting this back. Like, we're not taking this. and she got upset and she like sighed at me, and I was like, it's fine, like we're gonna go. You have toys at home. We're not gonna take this worm. I have no need for this. So she got upset, and then we carried on going through this store, and she got behind me again, and I was like, what is this dog doing? So I look at her, and so smart, so sneaky. She was carrying a shorter worm. She was like, okay, maybe I was too dramatic with that one. Like, maybe mom will say, okay, if it's smaller. Which, isn't bad logic if you think about it. But, I still have no need for doorstep worms. So, I said no, and, like, we're putting this back, and the number of people who were low-key judging me because I was like no to my beautiful and cute and trying service dog. I just had to not receive those people's judgments, and that's fine. Like, that was hilarious to me. And sometimes you argue with your pups in public, and that's fine. You just have to move forward, and people need to maybe give you some space, and have some understanding that you are also managing personalities. They're not robot dogs. So, always interesting things going on. One thing that's burnt into my memory and existence is, I don't know what happened, but Eden, we were on campus, and she has incredible control of her body. Okay, so she has blood capacity for immense hours, but she can communicate when she needs to go outside of like standard practices. So she's like bugging me, and I'm like, okay, we need to go outside. Guys, when I tell you that my dog got explosive diarrhea on my university campus, it was bad, people. That was something else, and that was a humbling experience for sure. I called my mom in a panic, and she was like, I'll be there in 2 hours, because normally it's me with that kind of situation, and like I call her and she's like, I will be there immediately, but she didn't understand that the same level of urgency was applying just with Eden now. And that was insane. She was sick for like 4 days, and we took her to the vet, and then it kind of sorted itself out. But that was wild. I stopped being embarrassed after that of like most things. I was like, well, if you can be attached to a dog that's kind of shitting as you walk, like, you can achieve many things. I also learned in that process that a couple of my lecturers kind of cared more about Eden than they cared about me. They were very worried about her well-being, which is appreciated. But also, if I'm trying to be discreet and tell you that she's sick, please just believe me and don't make me elaborate. Because that's really awkward. But she was fine. She was happy after we solved the problem. That was an experience that I don't really wish on anybody, but happens, I guess. And I also traveled with Eden quite a lot, so she behaves impeccably in airports. We do have conversations about like, listen, you are representing the workforce right now, so behave as such. And she would always walk with like a strut in the airports and kind of judge the regular dogs who have to go in the crates. She would look at them and walk past them and be like, ha, I don't have to go in a crate. I get to go in the plane with my person. And I kind of had to manage that that sass energy in airports, because it kind of got much sometimes. But if you have all the paperwork for your dog and like they're registered and you have all of that stuff, you're good. People need to kind of learn how to check in a dog, but it's fine. And if you think about like where she sits in the plane, I get in, I'm generally in the middle seat, but she will have organized them to sit under your seat so they don't take up any room for other people. She just kind of sits in line with where my seat is and perfectly happy there. The only real reaction you would see to us flying and being in the plane would be her nails kind of going in a little bit into the floor when we took off, just to kind of balance. But she was phenomenal in planes. Pilots loved her. That one tried to get her to do a photo in the cockpit, and she was like, "No, but I do not go into small spaces with strangers," which fair, stranger danger. And that was interesting because they were also like, "Why can't you make her go in here?" I was like, she doesn't want to. So you have to respect their comfort levels as well. We had a cute little guy who was like 3 years old or something that walked past us, and everyone looked because it's not really that normal to have a dog on a plane. This little guy walked past us and he goes, "Look, Dad, a cat." And that was amazing to me. We laughed about it, and he kind of looked at us. He said, "Yeah, we're learning about animals, but clearly we have a little bit of work to do." I said earlier that I have an incredibly intuitive animal, right? And so I think this next story really encapsulates that about Eden. So we were in, I think, Johannesburg, and we were in the airport, and there was a man who was sitting like on a bench, very normal, right? And this is where sometimes you have to listen to your pups and give them space to guide you, which is different to guide dogs who really take the lead a lot more regularly, like every day. So she saw this man. I didn't really see him as like a big deal. She saw this man and she would not move. Remember, she's stubborn, so she sat down and she would not move. And I was like, "Come here, we gotta go. Let's go." Nope, she sat still. And to avoid kind of a whole debacle, I was like, "Okay, where do you want to go? Well, what are we doing here?" So she gets up and I was like, "Where are we going?" And she led me over to this man. That was really awkward, guys, because she, like, it doesn't look like she's leading. It looks like I'm leading and walking over to this random man. Anyway, so I'm sort of getting over myself at this point and very confused in the situation. And she sat down in front of him and just kind of looked at him. This man burst into tears, starts sobbing in his hands, and Eden put her face on his knee. And I was like, "What is going on here? What is happening? What is this dog doing?" And it was incredible. He looked at me and said, "I really needed that." And she would not leave him. And like, something happened with him, like his girlfriend didn't arrive or something, and like sent him a minute. It sounds very like movie-esque, but it was wild. She just knew that he needed some extra love that day, and she wouldn't leave him until she was satisfied that he had sufficient love and that he was okay. And that's phenomenal to me. I can't believe that she picked up on this guy's like sadness from like so far away. I was like, where are we going? What is happening? This is a beautiful experience, and I love her for that. I love that she does that, and she very much learned on the job skills that she was not necessarily given in training. She's technically not an emotional support dog, but that I think is like a misnomer because they really are. It's just inherent in the job, I guess. But she learned how to manage my anxiety without me even knowing that that's what she was doing. So her response to anybody feeling anxious, and we kind of learned this in the previous story with the sad airport man, is her response to any kind of anxiety or like sadness is excessive love. She will just distract you from your sadness, from your fears, from your anxiety by just loving on you, and that's awesome. We also went through a global pandemic together, which was a lot, and my anxiety in that period was crazy, and she was very helpful. It was very helpful having her during that process of figuring out life in a pandemic. And then when we started going out in public again, like after lockdowns and stuff, we kind of figured out that she was adjusting where she was sitting to reflect my emotional well-being. So she would move from her place next to me on my left side. That's where she generally had a piece of her body touching me on my wheelchair regardless where we are. But when she's working, she's on my left side. But she then would move. She would pick up on my anxiety and she would then move to sit behind me, which in a way is like, don't worry, Mom, I got your back. And that was really interesting to me because I never told her to do that. She just started doing that, and that was super helpful because she would move and it kind of became like an indicator to other people around me to check up on us and to be like, Katie, are you okay right now? And that made it easier to actually address how I was feeling or whether I was anxious or what I needed to happen around the anxiety, because Eden created that bridge of communicating in a space that's hard to communicate your feelings. She also began to see, like, if there were people coming from behind me, she would get like a and be a warning sign to me that there are people behind me. Not at all aggressively, just like, Mom, be aware there are people. And she never did that with people who were coming from like in front of me, which is quite interesting. I appreciate that a lot. And I think a good reflection of the importance of these kinds of skills is with this next experience. So I went to stay with my friend Taylor in Wilderness. That's where he lives. I stayed there for 6 days, and that's a whole story that we can talk about separately. I'll maybe bring him on the podcast to talk about stuff. So I have anxiety about needing help and like not being heard. So I was like sleeping, and we had built this system where I had my phone with me, so if I needed him, I could like call on my phone and he would come and help me. But the issue at that morning was that I, for some reason, didn't have my phone. Like, we'd moved it throughout the night for whatever reason, so I didn't have it with me. And I started to panic, but then I remembered that I have a service dog. She came with me. It was one of her last working trips, and I called her, and in this moment, I was like, oh, I have a dog that can help me. So I told her to speak, and she did. And once you get her going, she's like, oh, this is what we're doing, and she's on it. So she's barking and speaking and doing the thing, and Taylor came out of the room like, why are you barking? What are you doing? Nothing's happening. And I was like, no, that's me. And he had to like change the way he was thinking about it. Oh, good job, Eden. And she got like a treat. And she was super impressed with herself that she had like solved this problem. The thing about that is that that's a way bigger deal than I recognized, and that I realized the impact of these working dogs is, because having her there changed that experience from something that could have been really traumatic to me, and it just changed it into like a normal experience. This is, I think, what people need to understand about having these dogs and how they work. It's like you might be seeing them lying on the floor sleeping in a lecture and think that that's what they do, but that's not all that they do, and they really are powerful in the moments that you need them to be. That's why we have them. It's not for like fun, and it's not for like having companionship, even though that's beautiful. It's really for managing these moments where it could be way harder and way more traumatic than it needs to be, and sometimes you just need a pup. So that was phenomenal to me, that she changed that whole experience and it became like a beautiful memory. So I think I want to end with just a couple lessons and signs of growth, I guess, since having Eden as my service dog. I think I've grown in confidence. I have always been like an activist and an advocate for my own needs, but I also had to become an advocate for her well-being. I didn't realize that actually, after having her for a couple of years, I was way more open and ready to go into spaces by myself, because I had her. Like, I didn't need people, because I knew that I had her as like a constant partner, and she's unconditionally committed to me, and that's an incredible thing to have as a disabled person who has a lot of complexes around abandonment and stuff. So that's really beautiful. I also think that the emotional benefits of having these dogs are massive, and we don't appreciate them as we should. I think she gave me breathing room. I don't know if that makes sense, but being a disabled person is an intense experience, and having her around gives breathing room. It like allows me to know that I'm supported even if I'm just with her. It also taught me, like, it took me a minute, but it's okay to have help. As disabled people, we are indoctrinated to believe that we need to do everything on our own to be like a successful human being, and it's not okay to ask for help because then you're being needy or whatever. But like having a constant companion who's unconditionally committed to supporting you, that really broke down my internalized barriers and narratives around having to do everything for myself and putting that pressure on myself. It's okay that she can open a door for you. Like, you don't need to do all of these things by yourself and for yourself for you to successfully navigate a space. So those are some of the big ones. I hope that people who have working dogs have similar interesting stories. I know that they do, and we really do love like sharing about our pups. They're like our babies. Now I'm waiting for my new working dog to arrive. I didn't understand in the beginning that people had said to me, like people in the working dog community had said, don't worry, you get the dog that you need, you don't necessarily get the dog that you want. And that is such a true statement. I am so grateful that I got Eden and everything that she has brought to my life. So many experiences would have been different if I didn't have her. And I've grown so much and learned so much. It's such an incredible gift to share the journey with incredible beings like Eden, and I'm excited to see where the journey goes from here, because now I have this whole journey with another pup, and Eden's gonna be a part of that as well, and that's exciting to see her in a different role. Very much leaned into retirement life. The day she retired, she was like, cheers guys, have a beautiful day at work, mom. But I think this is such an incredible thing to experience, and I think if you are thinking about it, you should definitely investigate it. There is work involved in it. It's not simple, but it is worth it. That was maybe a longer session than we had planned to have. I hope it was entertaining and insightful for you. I'll keep you posted on where we're at with any developments, and I'll see you in the next one.